Picture this. It's May of 1955. American assembly lines are humming 24 hours a day, churning out chrome-laden Chevrolet Bel Airs and Ford Thunderbirds. Detroit is celebrating the greatest sales boom in automotive history. Car sales have quadrupled since the end of the war just 10 years earlier. The big three, General Motors, Ford and Chrysler, control 94% of the market. Americans are buying homes in the suburbs, having babies at a record pace of 4 million births per year. And they need cars to drive those new interstate highways President Eisenhower is planning. In this atmosphere of American automotive dominance, something extraordinary is happening at the Sindelfingen plant in Germany. Mercedes-Benz is rolling out the first production examples of a car that wasn't even a sketch on paper 20 months earlier, the 190 SL, a car that would outsell its famous sibling, the 300 SL Gullwing, by a ratio of 8-1, a car that would bring Mercedes-Benz back from the ashes of war and help define what a sports touring car could be. But here's what makes this story remarkable. When Max Hoffmann, the legendary Austrian-American car importer, sat down with the Daimler-Benz board in Stuttgart in September of 1953, this car didn't exist. It wasn't in development, it wasn't being discussed, it was just an idea in Hoffmann's mind. And he wanted a working prototype ready for the New York Auto Show in February of 1954, 5 months away. The Germans thought he was mad. They were already stretched thin, preparing for the 1954 racing season with the new W196R Formula car. They had just committed to producing a street version of the 300 SL Gullwing, and now Hoffmann wanted a second sports car, an affordable one, based on their humble 180 sedan, to be shown alongside the Gullwing at Madison Square Garden in 5 months. Chief engineer Fritz Nallinger later recalled Hoffmann's pitch with a mixture of admiration and disbelief. When Nallinger suggested using the 180 sedan platform to save costs, Hoffmann's immediate reaction was skeptical. But by the end of that September meeting, the board had made their decision. They would attempt the impossible. Topic 1. The 5-month sprint to New York. On September 25, 1953, just days after that pivotal board meeting, stylist Walter Hecker showed his boss, Carl Wilfert, the first blueprints of what would become the 190 SL prototype. Everyone was excited. The car borrowed design elements from the 300 SL while incorporating styling cues from the 180 sedan behind the rear fenders. Then Hecker did something that still seems impossible by today's standards. In just 3 days, he completed the final blueprints needed to build the car. 3 days. Let that sink in for a moment. Modern automotive development cycles measure in years, not days. Computer-aided design, wind tunnel testing, crash simulations, none of that existed, just pencils, paper, and the pressure of an impossible deadline. But the real race had only begun. The team had until October 31st, just over a month, to finalize the shapes for the wooden blocks that would be used to hammer out the body panels. 2 weeks after Hoffmann's visit, the directors were examining initial draft designs. 2 weeks after that, they evaluated the first 1:10 scale model. 8 weeks after the September meeting, a full-scale model stood ready for inspection. The pace was relentless. The floor assembly from the 180 had to be shortened by 10 inches and adapted to accommodate a sports car's needs. The right engine had to be selected and tested. The independent front suspension with double wishbones had to be engineered. The single-joint swing rear axle, based on proven Mercedes racing design, had to be perfected. And through it all, everyone knew the prototype had to be in New York by early February. Not just any prototype, one that would stand beside the legendary Gullwing, one that would convince American dealers and press that Mercedes-Benz was serious about the sports car market. On February 6th, 1954, the doors opened at the International Motorsports Show at Madison Square Garden on 8th Avenue. There, on the Mercedes-Benz stand, sat two silver cars that would change automotive history. The 300 SL Gullwing, already famous from its racing victories, naturally drew the most attention. But beside it sat something unexpected: the 190 SL prototype. The prototype differed significantly from what would eventually reach production. It featured a stylized air intake on the hood that would later be deleted. The front edge of the hood sat in a different position. The rear wheel cutouts lacked the distinctive eyebrows that would characterize the production car. Even the bumpers, indicators, and rear lights would change. Mercedes engineers had accomplished their 5-month miracle, but they knew the real work was just beginning. Topic 2. The 15-month refinement. The reaction at the New York Auto Show gave Mercedes the confidence to move forward, but it also revealed how much work remained. The prototype shown in February 1954 was, in the words of Mercedes documentation, neither matured in its styling nor fully tested in terms of its engineering. What followed was a 15-month period of intense refinement and testing. This wasn't just about perfecting the styling, though significant changes were made. The entire car needed to be engineered for production, tested for reliability, and prepared for the demanding American market that Hoffman knew so well. The engineering team, led by Fritz Nallinger, faced a fundamental challenge: how to create a sports car experience using components from a 4-door family sedan. The 180 Ponton sedan was never designed for spirited driving. Its 1.9-litre engine, designated M121BII, produced 105 PS/din at 5,700 RPM, respectable for a sedan, but would it be enough for a sports car? They fitted the engine with twin Solex 44 PHH horizontal 2-stage carburetors. These carburetors would later gain a controversial reputation among owners, primarily due to lack of understanding about their proper maintenance. But in 1955 they represented sophisticated German engineering, carefully calibrated to deliver smooth power across the rev range. The chassis engineering tells the real story of Mercedes's approach. Rather than create an expensive bespoke platform like the 300 SL's tubular space frame, they modified the 180's unitary construction. But the modifications were extensive. The wheelbase measured 94.5 inches, identical to the 300 SL, achieved by cutting 10 inches from the 180's platform. The front suspension used a sophisticated subframe isolated from the chassis with rubber bushings. This subframe supported the engine and the double wishbone front suspension with coil springs and hydraulic shock absorbers. This isolation provided a vibration-free ride that was virtually unheard of in 2-seater sports cars of the era. Your typical British sports car of 1955 rattled and shook over rough roads. The 190 SL glided. The single pivot swing axle at the rear was based directly on Mercedes's racing experience. Coil springs and hydraulic shock absorbers completed the package. Independent suspension at all 4 corners was still relatively rare in 1955, especially at this price point. It gave the 190 SL handling characteristics that impressed the automotive press of the day. Throughout 1954, the car was tested and refined. Engineers at Mercedes knew the American market demanded reliability. Cars had to work in the Arizona desert heat and survive Minnesota winters. The 190 SL would need to cruise all day on the newly planned American interstate highway system without overheating or breaking down. Pre-production began at Sindelfingen in January of 1955. These early cars allowed Mercedes to identify and solve manufacturing issues before full production commenced. Then, in March of 1955, the final production version made its debut at the Geneva Motor Show. The transformation from the February 1954 prototype was remarkable. The hood scoop was gone. Eyebrows now graced the rear wheel cutouts. The bumpers, lights and trim had all been redesigned. The interior had been refined. Every detail had been considered, tested and improved. By May of 1955, 15 months after the prototype's debut, full-scale production began at Sindelfingen. Topic 3. Engineering compromises and smart decisions. The 190 SL represented a masterclass in automotive engineering compromise, not in the negative sense, but in the art of making smart decisions that balanced performance, cost, comfort, and reliability. Every choice the engineers made tells us something about Mercedes' philosophy and their understanding of the American market. Start with the engine. 105 horsepower doesn't sound impressive, even for 1955. The 300 SL produced more than double that. But Mercedes engineers understood something crucial. This wasn't a car for racing. Designer Joseph Müller explained it perfectly at the time. It is intended for a clientele who wish to cover long distances at high speed in a car that looks very sporty but is also highly comfortable. The M121 BII engine displaced 1,897 cubic centimeters. It featured a single overhead camshaft and an over-square design, 85mm bore with an 83.6mm stroke. Based on the 300 SL's straight-six engine, it shared the same bore but had a reduced stroke. This design allowed the engine to rev freely to 5,700 RPM, where it developed maximum power. The dual Solex carburetors provided smooth fuel delivery. Fuel consumption averaged about 9 liters per 100 kilometers, roughly 26 miles per gallon in American terms. The 65-liter fuel tank gave adequate range for long-distance touring. Top speed reached 170 kilometers per hour, about 106 miles per hour, which was genuinely quick for 1955 American highways. 0 to 100 kilometers per hour, 62 miles per hour, required 14.4 seconds. Again, not sports car territory by racing standards, but perfectly adequate for highway merging and passing. More importantly, the E-Sport car felt sporty. The 4-speed manual transmission with its floor-mounted shifter gave drivers engagement. The fully synchronized gearbox was smooth and precise, a revelation compared to the crash boxes still common in American cars. The body construction deserves special attention. The 190 SL pioneered what we now call monocoque or unibody construction in a sports car. Except for bolt-on rocker panels, the steel body panels, frame and floors were welded together, some panels even secured with special twist nails to form an incredibly rigid structure. But here's where it gets interesting. To save weight, Mercedes used aluminum extensively. The doors, hood and trunk lid were aluminum. So were the A and B posts and the dash cowl. This selective use of aluminum kept the curb weight at 2,552 pounds, still heavier than a proper British sports car, but impressively light for a car offering this level of comfort and equipment. The drum brakes, large units from ATE called turbo because of their ventilation system, provided adequate stopping power for the car's performance. 13-inch steel wheels with Mercedes hubcaps completed the practical side of the package. This wasn't a car trying to be something it wasn't. It was a refined, comfortable touring sports car that happened to look sensational. Topic 4. The American market invasion. While Mercedes was refining the 190 SL through 1954 and early 1955, something remarkable was happening in America. The automotive market was experiencing unprecedented growth. Remember those numbers? Car sales had quadrupled between 1945 and 1955. Americans who had endured Depression-era privation and wartime rationing were ready to spend money. The year 1955 specifically marked a pivotal moment in American automotive history. Chevrolet introduced the all-new Bel Air with its revolutionary small-block 265 cubic inch V8 engine. Ford launched the two-seater Thunderbird to compete with Chevrolet's Corvette. Detroit was engaged in a horsepower race with bigger engines, more chrome, and increasingly elaborate styling. Into this market, Mercedes-Benz was preparing to launch a car powered by a 1.9-litre four-cylinder engine, producing 105 horsepower. A car that cost $3,998 for the soft-top Roadster, or $4,295 with the removable hardtop. For context, you could buy a full-size Chevrolet with a V8 for about $2,000. The 190 SL cost twice as much. But Max Hoffman understood something that Detroit didn't. There was a growing market of affluent Americans who wanted something different. They didn't want to look like everyone else on their suburban street. They wanted European sophistication. They wanted a car that turned heads not through sheer size and chrome, but through elegant design and engineering refinement. The 190 SL delivered exactly that. When Americans saw it for the first time in Mercedes dealerships in the summer of 1955, they saw a car that looked like its legendary sibling, the 300 SL, but cost roughly half as much. The 300 SL Roadster commanded $7,463, nearly double the 190 SL's price. For many buyers, the decision was easy. Yes, the 300 SL was faster and more exclusive, but the 190 SL offered the same head-turning styling, the same Mercedes build quality, and a driving experience that was genuinely enjoyable. It became a hit with both men and women. In fact, Mercedes quickly realized the car was particularly popular with female buyers, which was unusual for a sports car in the 1950s. The production numbers tell the success story. In 1956 alone, Mercedes produced 4,032 190 SLs, the peak production year. By contrast, the 300 SL sold in much smaller numbers. The 8-to-1 sales ratio that Hoffman had predicted proved accurate. Approximately 70% of all 190 SLs were exported to the United States. Celebrities embraced the car. Grace Kelly, before becoming Princess Grace of Monaco, was frequently photographed with hers. She reportedly chauffeured Frank Sinatra around Beverly Hills in her 190 SL. Other famous owners included Ingrid Bergman, Gina Lollobrigida, and later Beatles drummer Ringo Starr. The car won design awards in Holland, Switzerland, and at France's Grand Prix d'Elegance. It even saw limited competition success, with Doug Stern winning at the Macau Grand Prix and distributor Joseph F. Weckerle taking the under 2-litre class win at Casablanca in 1955. In the first year of production alone, Mercedes vindicated Hoffman's vision. While Detroit was celebrating its dominance with ever larger chrome-laden vehicles, a small German Roadster with a 4-cylinder engine was quietly carving out a profitable niche. It brought Mercedes-Benz significant profits while establishing the brand's post-war reputation in America. Topic 5. Production success and lasting legacy. From May of 1955 through February of 1963, Mercedes-Benz produced 25,881 examples of the 190 SL. For a specialized sports car, these are impressive numbers. More impressive is what those numbers meant. The 190 SL was genuinely profitable. It achieved exactly what Max Hoffman had promised. It made money while building Mercedes' reputation in the crucial American market. The initial price in Germany was 16,500 Deutsche Marks. In America, it started at $3,998 for the Roadster. Initially, the car was available only in silver metallic, a tribute to the legendary Silver Arrows racing cars. This restriction lasted only for the first year, after which buyers could choose from a range of colors. Throughout its production run, Mercedes continuously improved the car. In March of 1956, wide chrome trim strips appeared on the upper door edges. In June of 1956, larger rear light units were installed, the same units used on the 220A, 219 and 220S models. In July of 1957, the rear number plate illumination moved to the bumper horns to accommodate the broader license plates being introduced at that time. The most significant update came in October of 1959, when a new hardtop with a larger rear window dramatically improved rear visibility in the coupe version. In August of 1960, the trunk lock changed and a recessed handle replaced the previous bow-type handle. These weren't revolutionary changes, but they demonstrated Mercedes's commitment to continuous improvement. The car established several important precedents. It initiated Mercedes-Benz's post-war Roadster tradition, a lineage that continues today. The SL designation, which we now know stands for Superlight or Superlight, based on internal documents discovered in 2017, became one of the most recognizable nameplates in automotive history. The 190 SL proved that a sports car didn't need to be uncomfortable or unreliable. British sports cars of the era, MGs, Triumphs, Austin Healys, offered excitement but demanded tolerance for leaks, rattles, and frequent mechanical attention. The 190 SL demonstrated that you could have sporty driving with German reliability and refinement. Perhaps most importantly, the car succeeded in its core mission. It made Mercedes-Benz accessible to a broader range of American buyers while maintaining the brand's prestige. Someone who bought a 190 SL in 1955 wasn't buying a lesser Mercedes, they were buying a car that was right-sized for them, sporty, elegant, reliable, and distinctly Mercedes-Benz. By 1963, when the last 190 SL rolled off the Sindelfingen line, the automotive world had changed. The 190 SL had helped change it. Mercedes had proven that a German manufacturer could compete successfully in the American market, not by copying Detroit's formula of size and horsepower, but by offering something different. European sophistication, engineering excellence, and timeless design. Today, the Milestone Car Society recognizes the 190 SL as a significant automotive achievement. Well-restored examples command prices ranging from $60,000 to $200,000, a dramatic appreciation from the 1970s when these cars depreciated to as little as $2,000. Looking back from our perspective today, the 190 SL's development story seems almost impossible. From Max Hoffmann's September 1953. Meeting with the Daimler-Benz board to the May 1955 production start represents just 20 months. The 5-month sprint to create a presentable prototype for the New York Auto Show was followed by 15 months of intensive refinement and testing. Think about what Mercedes accomplished in that time. They created a completely new body style. They adapted a sedan platform into a proper sports car chassis. They engineered a sophisticated independent suspension system. They developed new manufacturing processes for combining steel and aluminum body panels. They established a production line capable of building thousands of units annually. And they did all this while preparing for the 1954 racing season and launching the 300 SL Gullwing into production. The 190 SL succeeded because Mercedes understood exactly what they were creating. It wasn't a race car. It wasn't trying to compete with the Gullwing's performance. It was a refined, comfortable touring sports car that looked spectacular and drove beautifully. It offered Mercedes quality and engineering at a price point that opened the brand to thousands of new customers. While Detroit celebrated its dominance in 1955, producing millions of cars for a booming American market, a small factory in Germany was quietly demonstrating an alternative path. You didn't need a massive V8 engine or acres of chrome to create a desirable automobile. Sometimes, intelligent engineering, elegant design, and attention to detail could accomplish more than sheer size and power. Now we'd love to hear from you. Did you or your family own a 190 SL? What are your memories of these cars? Perhaps you've seen one at a car show or driven one yourself. Maybe you remember when these were just used cars before they became collectibles. Share your stories in the comments below. Your experiences are part of this car's living history. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the 190 SL's development story, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We'll continue exploring the fascinating stories behind classic cars, stories that reveal not just the vehicles themselves, but the people who created them and the times they lived in. Thank you for watching. Until next time, keep those classics on the road.